Victoria 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, finding a great balance between diplomacy, war, and country building. It's no wonder that I've made videos on the game. Well, when I have a consistent upload schedule at least. 12 years after release, Victoria 3 is out, and I've finally been able to play a few campaigns of the game. With this in mind, I'd like to give my thoughts on different aspects of the game and how they compare to its predecessor. I think it's most fitting to start with the economy. The Victorian era was a period of mass industrialization and innovation. Seeing how most of the artwork, advertising, and the direction of the game is focused around the economic aspect, it seems fitting to call it the core of gameplay. In Victoria 2, the economy was a large part of the game, with the player turning an agricultural backwater into an industrial center of the world. You mostly progress your industry by building desired factories, researching resource-boosting techs, and adding more resources to your economy, by war or through sphere of influences. Victoria 3 expands upon this greatly with its ability to micromanage the way factories and resource centers work, by adopting ever-changing production methods that impact the inputs, outputs, and efficiency of buildings. However, the immediate downside is that due to the increased amount of player input, most of Victoria 3's gameplay is inside the building menus. From building more government centers, to railroads, to additional resources, to more factories, the economy is an ever-changing system that requires your constant attention, surfing through a multitude of different menus hidden within each other. Victoria 2's spreadsheet design made the entire micromanagement of the economy available through a small selection of organized menus. But in Victoria 3, I find myself clicking between lenses tabs, to the market screen, to the building screen, to the construction menu, just to make small changes. The UI needs to be revamped to make knowing about and improving your economy much easier. During my single-player campaign, I found the new economic system to be very enjoyable, but the process of constantly changing production methods became very repetitive after just a few in-game decades. For example, the shift to dynamite your nation's mines requires the building of chemical factories in order to produce explosives. Or the switch to railroad infrastructure in a clothes factory requires more railroads and engines to be built, which in turn requires more steel, which in turn requires more coal and iron. This isn't helped by the lackluster AI economies that don't produce significant enough goods for the player when they fall short. When the time comes for you to expand your production methods and expand your economy, you need to make more buildings. This is done through the national build queue, which is based upon a certain amount of construction centers you have. This is very similar to the civilian factory system in Hoi 4, which I find very strange. In Victoria 2, factories were built and upgraded on their own timescale, independent of other factories. While construction for expanding factories makes sense, I don't see what a construction crew would be doing to expand a field of crops or to mine more coal. This leads to the annoying result of an economic expansion of a steel mill being hindered because you also wanted to increase wheat production at the same time. When expanding these buildings, you'll often notice the large cost of economic expansion that tends to put you in debt for parts of the game. In Victoria 2 and other Paradox games, debt was very often a bad place to be in, with the goal of getting out as fast as possible. However, I feel that Victoria 3 incentivizes the debt economy. With a large debt pool and low risk of bankruptcy, it's a key strategy to assume debt to have capital to expand your economy, which will make your nation more money in the long term. Meanwhile, in Victoria 2, the debt system very often led to bankruptcy, and loans were very hard to take in significant amounts, often destroying your nation. While Victoria 3 expands in many positive and negative directions for the economy, I'd say that the game spends too much of its time on the economic side, leaving other key parts of grand strategy behind. The diplomacy of Victoria 3 feels very grand at first, with its unique regional interest system and a variety of diplomatic plays. However, deeper insight reveals how hollow the system is. The diplomatic play feature feels far too rigid and basic. When you start a diplomatic play, nations have an opportunity to back down and capitulate to only the initial war goal added. This leads to the frustrating situation, whereas the USA, all I received was the Mexican part of Texas, and I had to wait 5 more years to take the rest of the Mexican cession. The in-game alliances always result in you being forced to join the nation you sign an alliance with. You cannot call additional allies mid-war, you cannot add more war goals mid-war, and swaying nations in the maneuver phase often feels far too rigid. I find the lack of player input in many of these instances causes the overall issues. Why can't I deny an enemy surrender for just one region? Maybe denying the capitulation could cause other nations to leave my side or join the enemy. In many Hoi 4 mods, you can deny a scripted peace deal for a total peace, typically at the cost of war support or political power. In the same vein, why can't I deny a call to arms from an ally? In Hoi 4, you can deny one of your guarantees at a cost to yourself. Maybe I can take a diplomatic hit or a militancy hit as a malice, but I don't even get a choice. On the topic of war goals, I like the addition of casus bellis such as the Take Treaty Port CB that allows you to access foreign markets. But I find that diplomatic play CBs are still restricted. Like, why can't I add a war goal that prevents another great power from intervening in a strategic region? For instance, as the UK, why can't I start a diplomatic play to prevent France from colonizing the South Africa region? Or as the US, prevent European nations from having an interest in the Americas? A large aspect about a diplomatic play is the threat of war between nations. While Victoria 2's warfare had many problems with AI, like being able to bait the AI into bad terrain, or the AI sieging random provinces while you're playing whack-a-mole, with humans behind the wheel in multiplayer, the game is a fun shift from Napoleonic warfare of large armies at singular battles to entire fronts spanning the world. Instead of fixing the AI or adding the ability to build army templates, the team behind Victoria 3 decided to make the most arbitrary and uninteresting war system possible. The system not only has few inputs for the player, it's slow and decided by factors outside of your control. A front can only have one battle at a time, meaning that you'll often be sitting there until your general can get a good dice roll in battle condition that allows you to win. Warfare in previous Paradox games was often one of the most interesting parts of the game, and was the key aspect of multiplayer. Even if Paradox is key to sticking to their lack of units concept, the system should at least be expanded to allow for greater input, such as starting more battles or focusing on objectives. Overall, I find that Victoria 3's role as an economic simulator has resulted in neglect in the diplomacy and military aspects of the game. The current state of the game prevents the player from playing the great game of geopolitics that the Victorian era was defined for. The lack of military maneuvers prevents the ability to have epic and interesting wars like the American Civil War and the German Unification Wars. While I think that Victoria 3 still has the potential to become yet another great Paradox series, like how Hoi 4, Stellaris, EU4, and CK2 have evolved over the years of expansions, I would say to avoid Victoria 3 until then. While I may still have some fun with Victoria 3's single player mode, I won't be leaving Victoria 2 anytime soon.